We got used to it.
Yeah.
We got used to recording.
Yeah.
All of our lectures are being recorded, and so.
Yeah, we won't post it publicly anywhere, but happy to share it with you and with anyone
Yes.
on the list and can't make it today. So if you're willing to start by taking a moment to introduce yourself and
yes, actually my first slide is introducing myself. So shall I start with the slides?
Take it away. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's see. Oh, just a second. One thing that I didn't check is where the thing is present. Oh, right place. Oh, cool. All right. So first, thank you very much for inviting me to present our work in soundscape ecology and what we've been doing. So basically, my group is people in computer science, data science, statistics, things like that. And we partner with people in the application side. And one of our preferred applications is soundscape ecology. So we have been doing some work for some years now. So, that's on me, but the work that's is going to be mentioned here from what we did are always, of course, results in partnership. So these are just some of the people that are involved in the techniques and in the results that I'm going to be presented, as well as our current projects. Okay, so Professor Maria Cristina is in Brazil, and Professor, actually, most of these people here are in Brazil. So they are from University of São Paulo, State University of São Paulo, University of Campinas there. And of course, I have other partners too in the USA and here in Ireland. But this is for more recent stuff that we are doing right now. So Professor Maria Cristina Ferreira de Oliveira is from my former group in Brazil. I was an associate professor there at the University of São Paulo for 30 plus years until 2019, and then I moved here to UCC in Ireland, and started as a lecturer. I basically reset my career. So my main field of research is visualization in connection with machine learning models and techniques. And I tend to work more on applications of those things, although we still handle a little bit of the basic algorithms. I tend to work in quite a few applications. And my favorite ones, or my main fields of applications, are in document analysis, biological data, and soundscape ecology. And I have collaborators in these projects in various places. As you may notice as I present, although I don't know what part is there, but you'll see. All right, that's me. So the presentation today is going to be on techniques that we studied and also some things that we developed in data science or machine learning and visualization for studies in soundscape ecology. Okay, I don't need to define soundscape ecology for this crowd, which is how I usually start some discussion like that, some talk like that. But what we started by trying to work on segregation tasks, because not only for this application, but from many applications that we've worked on, we tend to be able to redefine what the user or the client, so to speak, is requiring as a combination of feature selection and classification tasks, okay? Which is a way of us from data science, computer science to frame what we are trying to do to help users. So in soundscape ecology, one thing that is a challenge, besides the amount of data, besides the size of the data set, is the fact that one type of data, which is the sounds recorded, in our case, in natural environments, are meant to solve thousands of different problems. Okay, so the data set is one, and the questions are so many. So we started working with this data, as we tend to do, to try and segregate things in the recordings. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about segregation tasks. From direct feature extraction, we used the indices and extracted features from both the sound and the spectrogram, and then neural models for that task. So then we are going to talk a bit about the role of feature selection and of active learning in support to soundscape ecology tasks, and the current problems we are working on right now, our current projects. Okay, so of course, data science, machine learning, and visualization are all over the place. And what we try and do in our applications is to support by developing tools and techniques that can help define the features in the data set that can discriminate certain, let's call, events of interest. An event for us is anything from finding the quality of that environment to particular actual events like rain and boats and things that are happening, plus what species of animals are in a particular environment. So all of those for us are, I will refer to them as events, okay? So we try to develop those tools and then adapt those tools to different research questions. So what would be the features of interest and the classification task behind finding the population of a particular species, or finding an invasive species, or finding out that the environment changed from one year to the other. So what would be the things that discriminate that particular problem from the rest? Okay, so we started easy with trying to discriminate landscapes, different landscapes from their recordings. Then we went on to try and discriminate groups of events. So groups of animals that might be in a particular environment, for instance, or rain or boats or things like that. And then we went on to try and discriminate species that we know from label data that are there. Okay, I think there is some sound masking there, but I'm hearing myself. Sorry about that. So I call these different scales of the problem. Okay, we'll see how. Well, as a tool to support us understand the data, because when we start with this application, there were quite very few models that were ready for us to use or to adapt. So when the models are not there or they are not defined, we tend to work with visualization techniques to try and understand the data, okay? And then those same techniques can be used later to try and improve the models or even evaluate the models. I'll try and give you an example of what I mean in some of the things that I'm going to show. But one technique that we are commonly or frequently using, let's say, is multidimensional projection. So multidimensional projections, you describe your data set. In this case, is not documents, is a series of sound recordings, right? And then you pre-process that and find a particular embedding, which is a matrix of attributes against individuals, right? So each recording is aligned, each attribute in relation to that recording is a column. And then we project that into 2D spaces, sometimes 3D, but let's not go there, in two-dimensional spaces, so that we interpret groups that form there as things that in principle are highly related as described by the value matrix, let's call it, the attribute matrix, okay? This attribute matrix is actually very important in the sense that it can be generated by extracting features directly from the data, like examples here, or by, for instance, neural models that generated embeddings for us, from which we can do, besides machine learning, classification, and other things, we can do visualization, okay? So techniques that we tend to use, or people tend to use in this case, vary from using basic PCA to more popular techniques such as TSNE and UMAP. So I don't know how that goes usually, but I don't mind if I get interrupted with questions, okay? So if you want to just do a conversation, I'm fine with that. And I'm also fine with questions at the end. All right. This is going to appear again forward there. Okay. So the first thing that we did, try to distinguish. We were working in segregation. So let's see if we can distinguish different landscapes automatically, right? So before we do automatically, we try different things and use visualization as a support. So basically, what we did here was to extract from audio files acoustic indices, other acoustic measurements directly from the sound, and use the spectrogram to extract descriptors, image descriptors from the spectrograms, all right? So from that, we generate the data table, so to speak, the attribute table, and then we do visualization to see if that can be discriminated, and we use numerical evaluation of the embeddings of the spaces to see if the labels can be discriminated and evaluated that in terms of numerical values, right? So here, for instance, is one of our experiments. So we had data from Costa Rica, two different forest data recordings in two different environments, different in the sense that they were the same forest, but one set of files was recorded closer to the river, and the other was recorded far from the river. And we had a data set that was underwater recordings, two sets of underwater recordings in two different places in Brazil. Okay, so the length is usually 1 minute. Well, the length of the data was either 10 minutes and 1 minute, or 1 minute for the first two, and 15 minutes for the other two. And we actually used in the original size in this experiment. So from those recordings, we extracted these features. So these are indices, right? Established by the community of environmentalists and engineers and everybody that is trying to quantify soundscape recordings, image descriptors from the spectrogram, and direct measurements from the audio, like SPL, NP, roughness, rugosity, and MFCC, things like that. Okay, so in total, we had, let's see, I think it was 128 features. Sorry, the slides are supposed to be here. But in the end, what we found is that first, it's possible to discriminate those different environments, right? So these are the two, red and black are the two areas of Costa Rica. Here is one underwater environment, and this other one is the other underwater environment. There is two colors here because they were given to us as two separate file sets, but then when they mixed up in our visualizations, we went back to the colleagues and they said, no, they are the same recordings. We just separated into different batches, but basically these two colors here are not supposed to discriminate anyway. So basically, this is an indication that using extracted features, we are capable of discriminating environments. That was confirmed by classification using the same embeddings that were used to generate the visualizations, okay? So the second scale, okay, that same work, we also used other types of visualization that gives us different perspectives on soundscapes. So this one, for instance, we cluster the data and then we present the clusters so as to interpret the clusters. This one is a heat map. You must be used to that kind of representation. And this one is parallel coordinates. So if I have time, I can get back to what we can do with these kinds of visualization, but I want first to carry on with the scale problem, right? We may come back here. So in the other scale, then we started looking into this discriminating groups of events. We worked a little bit with noise reduction. We worked with the detection of rain and boats, but that was separate. Here, what we were trying to do was to get, given a certain recording, to discriminate if there are frogs, birds, or insects, but in general, not particular frogs or particular birds or particular insects, okay? For that, the same approach as before did not work well, okay? We could not separate well the soundscapes that would be tagged as mainly frogs, mainly birds, or mainly insects, okay? So we had to resort to other approaches, and what we did in the end was to extract the features, the same features in a little more quantity actually, and then do feature ranking. So basically we used an extra tree classifier to rank the features and used the most important features or the most relevant features to do classification. We tested the random forest, SVM, and KNN to select the features that had highest accuracy to discriminate those groups of animals, okay? And the process is pretty much the same, except that classification is now in there to be able to narrow down the number of features that were capable of describing the presence of those groups of animals. So we had data, the data for this one was from our partners in São Paulo State. It's an area it's also a surface, it's forest, and it is a preserved area, but in the boundaries here, in the boundaries of that region, there is mixture of human intervention in various levels. So there's more or less coverage of vegetation. We had labeled data in 615 files with frogs, 840 with insects, 822 with birds, and we used 1 minute length recording for that experiment. So we had 15 acoustic indices, 36 image descriptors, and actually 128 image descriptions plus some measurements from the audio spectrum. In total, I think we had around 180 something features. Okay, so the results first focus on the most relevant features using that process that we illustrated before. And with that, we got very high accuracy discriminating the three of them together, perfect for frog versus insect, and also very high for the other two combinations. The visualizations actually can show that. I don't know if it's too small for you to see, but we see the mixture here of several examples of the discriminations in different colors. So this first one is for the three groups together, then two of them, and then the three 2 by 2, okay? We use two different measurements to quantify discrimination, and these are stress for the projection and silhouette. The silhouette is a value that can be used to estimate discrimination on labeled data, both in the embeddings and on the projection. Okay, so this is actually a help to eliminate embeddings that are not capable of discriminating before we actually try better solutions for the sets of features. I don't know how I am in time. I'm having fun. So how long do I have in total?
We're here until 11:30 typically, plus or minus a few minutes, so another 35 minutes or so. But
from now?
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Okay, thank you. I want to use all of that. I hope we can discuss a little bit. So then the next question is kind of natural. Can we distinguish species that are there, right? So basically, none of the previous approaches worked well in that scale, like we kind of expected. So we started moving towards neural network models, okay? So this is one of the work, the results that we got from studying neural network models for the discrimination of particular species. We had a data set. Let's see if the description is here. Should be, it isn't. But we had a data set that had 6 classes, 6 species of birds and 6 species of neurons, frogs, right? And we wanted to see what we could do about discriminating them, all right? So we worked with quite a few architectures, and the one that worked best in that case was feeding basically the images of the spectrograms to the neural network, and using quantification, which is fine-tuning the result of the classification with, or actually of the embeddings, with quantifying the number, using the distribution of the different classes into the data set as a means of balancing the result of the neural network. So basically, the results there were quite motivating, so to speak, in that quantification approaches with and without dropout. So the architecture was flexible. We used with dropout or without dropout, and with and without quantification. And the best results vary with and without dropout, but quantification was good every single time, okay? So I have the paper here. I'll get the proper results later. But I mean, the accuracy went around 78% in 6 classes, either 6 birds or 6 frogs, and a little bit less than that in 12. But here, the visualization can show us a little bit of what it is to try and discriminate species using features. So these are 128 features in the same way that we calculated before, to try and discriminate species. So the line here is the visualizations for indices and together with image descriptors, okay? So you can see there is a lot more mixture than here, where we can basically visually already understand that there's a lot more discrimination or segregation between birds, frogs, and all of them together, using the embeddings generated by the neural models, okay? So this is actually an illustration of what a particular embedding can do for you in terms of segregation. So visually we can identify that. The precisions are all there. There are like 6 different models. Some are better in one situation, some are better in other situations. But I think the paper is quite descriptive on how to build on that. Besides, the code is open, open source. The link is there somewhere. I'm actually going to show, it's going to be recorded because I'm going to show the GitHub repository. Right, another work that we did in that case is active learning for labeling. So right now we are worried about the labeling process, because if we can actually speed up the labeling that is done to support the development of new models, chances are we'll be able to run faster towards stable and solutions for many of our applications. So one of our students is actually working on the labeling problem using active learning techniques to support increasing the number of label data sets by having algorithms suggesting the labels and the expert confirming, instead of having the expert just go on recording by recording, marking and tagging, okay? So this is one of her previous results before she actually started her doctorate, sorry, that is doing the first, let's say, the first version of that. So she clusters the data, then she samples that cluster, the expert listens and annotates those. These are all simulated, right? We already had a bunch very good, sizable, let's say, a data set that was labeled. Okay, so we just simulated by sampling annotated things, but the idea of the process, yes, is you cluster the data, then you sample, the user is going to label the sample, and we are going to use, in that version was basically a proximity function from the ones that, are tagged, that are labeled, to suggest the labeling of the other recordings, okay? All of that because we knew that similar data were being plotted together in the visualizations, right? So if we can go back here, where the inspiration for that came from, here we have the segregation of the larger areas, right? But if we take a look at the groups that are well-formed, I can define well-formed later, but basically these groups are more dense than the others on the projections. We could also see certain patterns. We didn't do a systematic approach to that, but we could also see that certain things, certain events were being plotted in the same cluster here. So we are using that idea to support labeling, just to try some version of labeling that can be sped up by user interfaces supported by visualization. So we do some learning, and we try to employ learning and prediction algorithms to suggest new elements inside those clusters, right? We recluster, we sample again, and we send it back to the user, for the expert, in this case, for confirmation, or the user can basically mark it as wrong, right? And that is also learned back again. So that was our first try, but currently we are trying to improve that using a better representation of neighborhoods of sample data and tagged and labeled data, and also better techniques in both learning and visual and active learning. So one thing that I would like to maybe show to you is one idea that we've been working on, is what happens if I allow the user to interact with features so that best features are selected, okay? When is it that we need feature selection? So in our previous cases here, we did feature selection in one case. That was here in this work that was separating groups of animals, right? And that was automatic feature ranking and selection. So what if the user can influence quickly the process to define things that are capable of discriminating things of interest? Okay, so that's another idea that we're working on. So basically we have this technique, this tool. It's just an example here. I don't know how quick I can explain, but on the left-hand side here, we have the actual features. This is one of the examples. This is six species birds, right? So by the name here, it looks like birds. So these are the features that were either extracted or generated by the neural networks. In this case in particular, is the features that was generated by by the CNN neural network with dropout and without quantification in our case. It is one of the cases in that paper. So we do have 6 species of birds that were labeled, and this is actually a visualization of the features. So what happens here is I have the features and I have the label. The label in this case is the bird species, okay? So in this bar here, first we are calculating the correlation between each of the features, in this case, given by the neural network, but it could be another example of indices. I have here, I can show it to you, but in this case, we know the indices don't do a very good job. But anyway, this is the embedding from a neural network. And then here we have each one of the elements here is a feature. The tree that's built here is a minimum spanning tree in this case from a graph built from all the features, okay? The nodes that are larger and darker are the ones that are more correlated with the label, okay? And the label is the species. So this is one example. So I selected 36 of the 128 features. It's written 129, but one of them is just a reference. I can't go into too much detail because I would stay here until God knows when. But anyway, so you select from here. So in this case, I selected 36, and this is the discrimination I get. Okay, in this case, it's basically silhouette 0 between the 6 species. So let's say I want to use, so in this bar here, it is basically a ranking of the features, right? So I'm choosing here the 21 best features. I'm choosing here the 59 best features. I'm choosing here the 82 best features. Best as in defined by an algorithm, right? In this case, I can choose a few here. Relevance, in this case, is just the correlation, the one here, but I could choose extra trees classifier as the calculation for importance of the features. So I can do the selection here based on the automatic algorithm, or I can do it manually, or even I can do it here using the algorithm, and I can fine tune it manually. So let's say now I had chosen 60 something, right? So let's do 62. And then I want to remove some of them. So here they all seem similar because they are in the same branch. So maybe I want to reduce some of the features, okay? It's just an example. I mean, I'm just doing it. I'm no expert, of course. And also, once the features are generated by the neural models, they don't have names anymore, which is basically our guide is just the structure of the tree. So now I have 56, and then I want to see if those 56 are better or worse than the previous selection. So I can basically generate the projection here. Sorry if it takes a little because this is running in Brazil. I'm in Ireland. You are in the United States. I have a local version, but my computer here today decided to have a bad day. So I didn't want to take the risk. So better calculate in Brazil, in our server there, or their server there, not mine anymore. So you see, it went from 0, 1, whatever, 125, 127, okay? So actually, this is a reasonable increase, a significant increase in silhouette, which means a significant, which usually means significant increase of the capability of the currently selected features to discriminate compared to the previous one. So chances are, if I submitted that to a classifier, it's going to be better than the previous selection, right? So what does that tell us? First, that the user can play with things like that to help do feature selection. We can use automatic algorithms. And the other thing that is telling us is that the output of the neural network is actually offering more features than is necessary to discriminate what we want to discriminate, right? What does that mean? That the neural network is learning not only what we fed as labels, but is learning other stuff. That if I want to discriminate those categories, it might even disturb the discrimination, okay? In other words, there is a reason to do feature selection even after you use an effective neural model to generate the embeddings for your classification, okay? So let's see then if we select all of the features generated by the neural model. So this is all of them, all right? 128, this is the references, the actual label is never selected. So that you know that I'm not, so right. So here I'm going to generate again the projection. So why the visualization? It's not, of course, we are working with proper evaluation of those models using classification, right? But we are not, we sometimes use visualization when the model is not ready to understand if what we are doing is at least going in the right direction, okay? So let's see the silhouette here. The silhouette basically gives us a measure of discrimination on what we are seeing. So you see that from the, I don't remember how many I selected, I think it was 50 something features, to the whole data set, the whole set of features output by the neural network, there was actually a small decrease in silhouette, right? So there are things here that need to be studied best. Just as another example, a quick one, if I can find those. So the same 6 classes, this is a bunch of selected indices already. This is just the same sounds as that other picture, I hope. If it's not the birds, it's their neurons. This is the data set here is created by generating indices from the sounds instead of feeding to the neural network. Let's see if it's going to load. There's also the communication problem with Brazil, right? Hello, wake up.
Working, working.
Sorry?
It says, I'm working.
Yeah, let's try and speed up by choosing another one. I have, what I want is 6 all indices. That is selected indices. This is all indices. What happens is that the first loading of the data set is not, is slower than the other loads. So let's see if this one was loaded before.
I was wondering if you could take a question between.
Of course, why not? Why not? Go ahead. Questions, please.
Okay, you have it already.
Oh, it's there. But anyway, this is only indices, okay? Is 31, 30 indices that we calculated from the same sounds, and this is what we get, meaning all messed up. So in other words, the neural networks are actually doing the best job of discriminating when the scale is this one, species, okay? Even we couldn't find a combination of indices, which doesn't mean that there isn't. We could try and have the user, because here we know what they are. This is AR, this is ADI. Some of those, this is actually calculated from the spectrograms, MFCC, but we can basically calculate indices and interact, allowing the expert to do selections here. One case that we did that was interesting was getting the underwater sound. I'm going to stop with this because I'm having too much fun. I may stay here forever. Okay, so let's see. Let's go back to the slides. So one thing that we did was, for instance, let's say I want to see if I can discriminate from the underwater sounds where we had whales, okay? So basically what we did were we colored the data. This is not the example, by the way. This is something in biology. Oh no, that's actually birds and insects, the separation between birds and insects, but it is not I don't know. Yeah, this is not the neural networks. These are indices plus lots of other things. But two classes we can two groups of animals we can separate well. So what we can do, for instance, is let's say we label some event of interest, like whales, sounds of whales in the underwater sound, and we can play with the features here extracted by various models to see which combination of those features is capable of discriminating that particular event that we are looking for by looking at the visualization, okay? And then using those features to try and discriminate more in a larger data set. Okay, so let's finish. These are some definitions, because if you get the slides, the features that we talked about are there. Currently, we are improving those models. The neural network models are already improved in terms of accuracy and precision from feeding to the network, besides the image, also the indices, okay? We're starting to work in ocean data for monitoring with our partners in Northern Ireland. The work with birds and frogs continues in Brazil. And as I explained to you, we are trying to develop a little more results in the labeling problem. Okay, so some of the data was actually obtained by someone that wasn't mentioned before in the University of São Paulo, Brazil, Linilson Padovez, and the data from Costa Rica was provided by Brian Janowski in Purdue. And our financial support, I still don't have support in Ireland. I hope I will, but most of this work was done with the previous and current support from Brazilian financial agencies. And that was it for today. Sorry, I talked too much, as usual.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We will open up for questions. Bruce, you want to start?
Yeah. Thank you so much, first of all, for such a detailed presentation. We also had a lot of fun, especially this user interface where you could basically select the features and the visualizations is super cool. So I might ask you later if you have if it is an open source tool that you could provide us the link also, it would be helpful that we can also play around with it later. But for me, there are two questions. One I have about the visualization tools. So you showed these problems where we had limited number of classes. I was wondering what happens when you scale up to more like tens of classes, and then you will have more data points also. So I was once using these these stochastic models like UMAP or TSNA, and I found it difficult to visualize the data because first of all, if you are doing feature selection with this, you also have a lot of you also have some parameters for these models, right? You have like
True.
a number of components you have, or the minimum distances between the clusters. So you also have to take care of that, right? Or so the point is, like, as the number of groups increase, I had personally a problem that then sometimes you had groups that were overlapping on top of each other, because you're projecting this to a higher dimensional space, and there the boundaries are done, and then it projects them back into two-dimensional space so that you can visualize them, right?
Correct.
And I had this problem that the visualizations there were so many of these data points that were on top of each other. So it was almost difficult many times. I mean, if you have just a few classes, then and there is a very good separation between them, then it's easier. But maybe for cases where you're classifying between completely different events, like for instance frogs and birds, it might be easy. But when you're like, I was doing it inter bird species classification, and there you have a lot of similarities. So there it was almost impossible to have these very clearly defined samples.
Right.
So that would be one thing. So if you have experience with that, how to improve that, or were you using only limited data points in the end so that you had these you could visualize better? So that would be one thing. And the second question would be that do these visualizations actually translate to models then finding those separations, because you're using a different yeah, I mean, you're using the probabilistic models here, and you're doing separation, but in the end you're relying on a classifier. And of course it's still better to kind of get an idea of how your features are, but do they necessarily translate then to separations in the model domain, where you're actually trying to learn a model to separate? So yeah, so these are the questions about visualization. Then I also have a question about features, but I think I will stop here, and maybe some other people also have some questions. And if in the end there is some more time, I can maybe also ask other people. Thank you.
So thank you for your questions, because all of them are actually problems we are worried about, okay? So first, class mixture on the visualization. When you add more classes to a problem, of course, you also add more uncertainty, okay? Because each one of those classes, so when is it that a visualization is going to discriminate? When you're embedding, being it calculated by features or generated by a neural model, is discriminating, okay? So our experience is that if you are not seeing separation in the classes, like the examples I gave, let me go back to the birds and frogs here. This one, okay? Can you still see my screen? So basically here, that's precisely what you are saying. So when we have six in principle would be separable, but they are not necessarily separable because they are six, right? They are separable because the way you described your universe, your space, you described it in a way that those different birds can be discriminated, okay? So our experience is that if you don't have separation here, the problem can be in the projection itself, right? But chances are, if the mixture is too much like here, the problem is before. Your space is not capable of discriminating, right? So the same silhouette that we calculate for a multidimensional projection, we can calculate in the original space, okay? T-SNE, if you have the original space, you can, if you have a label data set, you can calculate the silhouette on the label data set, in the original space without doing any projection. If that's too bad, you know the projection is not going to show you much more. Okay? Disney is an exception for some cases. We can discuss this. We are quite experienced in that. But what happens is when we don't get, so what's the difference between these and these? It's the same data set, okay? The space is different. This is generated by the neural network, and these are generated by calculating. This one underneath here is by calculating features, okay? Indices plus some more features, all right? So there is a problem. You cannot rely on multidimensional projections to guarantee anything. But one thing that I know, if that this is mixture this way here, oh, sorry, chances are I will not go far with this embedding in classification, okay? So, yeah, when you get more classes, things mix more, but that's the case because your space is more mixed and because the visualization, the projection adds an extra problem there, okay? Which is trying to get, I don't know, 300 dimensions into 2. Okay, so yes, the projection tends to add a mixture between classes, but if your original space is good enough to segregate, you will see that as just a little mixture like here, okay, and not as a mess like here. You know what I mean? So yes, we learn to rely on this, and by looking at it, already know if the problem is here in the projection or in the original space that I'm using to do the projection. The projection doesn't do miracles. What Disney sometimes does, okay? Disney uses a different approach to, it redistributes the distance field. I don't know if you know the algorithm behind Disney, TSNE. It redistributes the distance field, okay? So our rule of thumb is, if Disney doesn't discriminate, nothing will. You know what I mean? So yes, in general, if it's better visually here, chances are your classification is going to be better. But you cannot rely only on the visual. That's why we calculate silhouette, stress, and other measures, because sometimes we look at it and say, oh, this is better than this, but then you calculate the silhouette and it's not actually. So you cannot rely only on your visuals. You have to have numbers together with it. But I've been collecting data for many years in my visualization course on multidimensional projections, and chances are, if the projection improves the discrimination, the classification is also going to be improved, okay? And quickly answering about that tool, yes, it's open source. And one thing that actually we could interact is I would love to adapt that tool for the case of soundscape ecology. People in biology are also willing to do a version of that. So yes, that was published. The reference, I think it's there. It's called Graphs from Features, right? And it's open source. The paper is open source. The code is open source. Okay. Did I answer a question?
Thank you very much. Yes, you did a great job. Thanks.
And I am available to continue that conversation anytime. So please feel free to contact me, and we can set up a meeting. And I can show you some examples to illustrate what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Just to hop in for a moment. Unfortunately, today I have another meeting at 11:30, so I'm going to need to hop out, but I will make you the host, Rosane, if anyone wants to stay on with any additional questions. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Maybe you should stop the recording if it hasn't been stopped already.
Yep, I will